What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 352. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me from across the table is Luis Scott-Vargas, LSV. How goes, sir?
It's going pretty well. It's actually the night before the Magic World Championship, so it's kind of unbelievable that you forced us to record the podcast. I should be focusing. I should be training. I should be meditating. I should be doing a lot of things, but...
he's teasing me, but it is true. You literally are going to be playing in the World Championship in a matter of hours.
In like 6 hours from now.
How are you feeling about your prep work and stuff? You feel like you could use another hour or two?
I'm actually feeling great. Deck lists are submitted. I've got this draft format down, I think, or at least as down as I'm going to get it. And, you know, I'm really looking forward. I did not think I would play another World, so it's just going to be an awesome experience.
Yeah, it's super cool, man. You just don't get that many chances to play, you know, at this level for anything, and don't mess it up. So we're going to be talking about something a little more topical this week. Normally we tend not to hit up the current events because, you know, we try to keep the show a little more on track as far as improving it limited, but we've got one that coincides pretty well with a lot of our listener base, and also, well, you and I directly, which is we're going to be talking about Magic Online. There was an announcement this week that we're going to cover, and we'll also go a little bit more broader topic and talk about the benefits and, you know, the goods and the bads about playing on Magic Online as well, just for our listener base that doesn't yet play on Magic Online, as it can be a really important part of improving as a player. Before we get into all that, of course, I want to mention our sponsor, channelfireball.com. This is the place to go if you want to get ahead of the game here on something like Kaladesh, which is going to be coming out. It's coming up sooner than it seems. You can go to channelfireball.com, and as the new cards become available, they will put them up for pre-order. And of course, when all of them are up, you can pre-order anything you want. So, you know, keep your eye on that as things move forward into preview season here. And of course, you can find awesome free content on the site. And you can even sell your cards back if you've got a big pile of rares from drafting a bunch and you don't really use them for constructed or haven't really traded them off, and you want to turn them into more booster packs so that you can draft again. You can trade them in and you'll get a 30% bonus. If you just need money, they'll do that too. And they'll get them out to you quickly, and they'll take care of you over at channelfireball.com. Also, the Patreon, that's right. You directly support the show. A lot of our listeners do that. You know, you can go on the website and choose any amount that you'd like to give per episode, and you even get a thank you card, a custom-made thank you card, by the way, in the mail, as well as a bunch of other cool perks depending on what level you get to. And one of them, Patreon question of the week. This one comes from Daniel Chiesa. He says, "Hi, I'm from Argentina, a country that borders with Chile, where Luis's mother came from." Which, by the way, I've met your mother, and I don't think she's from Chile. I don't want to correct Daniel too soon, but I know your mom.
Yes, it's close. My dad's actually from Chile.
Your dad
so he was born and grew up there, but my mom did not.
Yep. He says, "Simple question. How do I play faster on Magic Online?" And I picked this one because, of course, we're going to be talking about Magic Online quite a bit here. He says, "I almost always lose for lack of time. What can I do to improve my time management? Great show. The synergy between you two is amazing." Thank you, Daniel. We're going to be covering some of these topics in the main, but maybe we could just give a hint at what we're going to be talking about here for Daniel as far as time management. You know, the clock on Magic Online is a ruthless mistress, and if you hit zero, you lose the match, no matter where you were at, no matter how many games you were at, it's just, you're done.
Well, the first thing that stands out for me is that if you frequently find yourself running out of time, and it sounds like Daniel is running out of time a lot, probably means you need to play faster in paper also, because if you're using up your 25 minutes, that means that even with the interface, like it is more difficult to play online if you're not used to it. I'll definitely get ahead of that, but you have to be just very careful about how much time you're using just in a match of Magic, because it's hard to run out of time over and over and over again if you have some familiarity with how Magic Online works.
Okay, so this is interesting because later in the episode we're going to talk about specifics on how to save time and use different keys and shortcuts on Magic Online, which will cut the corners for you, right? That'll save you time and time. Each time you make an action on Magic Online, you'll be able to save a little bit of time. But there's also another bucket to address here, which is if you generally play fairly slow, or if you find yourself up against that clock, that is something else that you can address, right? So since we're going to cover the other one, how do you speed up? Like, you play lightning speed. I play pretty quickly on Magic Online as well. Like, I never, get clocked, or very, very rarely. But I also see people out on the Pro Tour. Some of the really good players play very deliberately, very slowly. They come to the right conclusion. They make their play and they go with it. If you do find yourself up against that, do you? I mean, it's a weird topic, right? Like, how do you play faster than you currently do?
Well, I mean, it's a little difficult because without knowing exactly how each player plays, it's hard to offer tailored advice. Because I know some players, part of the reason they play slow is every turn they try to reevaluate the board state from scratch.
Yeah.
They're like, all right, there's a 2-2 versus a 3-3, so I know I'm not going to attack. And then next turn they play their own 3-3, and they think, okay, now it's a 2-2 and a 3-3 versus a 3-3. Okay, I'm not going to attack with a 2-2 because they're a 3-3, but I'll attack with my 3-3. The next turn, their opponent plays something, and every time they reevaluate every single permutation. Whereas I think what you and I do is like, well, this exists already. When we add a new thing, we just talk about the new thing. And it impacts the old, like, maybe they're at low enough life total that you would attack with your 2-2 now. But for the most part, we're just looking at the delta, the difference between the old and the new. And I know some players who, at times, have tried to, from the ground up, evaluate every board state. And in general, you will do better if you focus on ramping up every time something changes, as opposed to just like, all right, let's take a look from stage one. And that leads to you thinking for too long.
Yeah, I found that, like, the more you practice at doing that, the more you're able to offload some of that background mental stuff, like getting a board state back up to where you were before. And that, the more you play, the more that happens. I remember when I first started, I was terrible at that. I had to do what you were saying, where I just have to be like, okay, I've got these cards in my hand, I've got this much mana, just trying to conceptualize all the things. And then the more you play, the more you find yourself just shortcutting that stuff. And you don't have to take that on as like an actual thinking task. It's more like an intuitive or a background type thing. So keep at it, Daniel. It will get easier. And we are going to talk, of course, in this episode as well, about some of the ways that you can improve your clock mechanically using Magic Online.
Right. If this episode were about something else, we would go into the specifics right now. So, Daniel, I hope you can listen to the rest of the show, and we'll have a lot of very specific, actionable things like which stops to set and which keys to use that will also help on Magic Online.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got a crack-a-pack here, though. I'm in the process of moving still, and I didn't grab one, so I opened one up on my Magic Online account and sacrificed one to the draft gods. But here we go. Oh, it's in weird order. Anyway, whatever. Woodland Patrol.
Woodland Patrol is a card I've never put in my deck. This is a 3-mana 3/2 Vigilance, and I'm just off it.
It should be a C, right? Like, it looks fine, and it's just not.
It just turns out this 3/2 is just not good in this format, and Vigilance is just not an ability on a low toughness creature.
Wailing Ghoul, the 1 and a black 1/3, and it mills you for 2 when it ETBs.
This is a role player. It's the kind of card that sometimes you put in a deck that really needs 2 drops or self-mill or both, but it's also still like a 12th pick.
Yep. Take Inventory. I think this is a good time to take inventory on the card itself. Did this come around? We had this as a card that we talked about early in the format. In your mind, is Take Inventory a real card?
It's not.
It's not.
If you can pick up a Take Inventory for free at the end of a pack, sure, do so. And maybe if you get 3, you can play them. Or I've even played 2 in a blue-red deck that really just wants to put spells in the stack. But I don't think I've ever taken a Take Inventory over another playable.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that we would have those weird situations where somebody had 4 or 5 of them pop up more than it did, and no, it just hasn't. I had one deck with 3 of them. I was pretty stoked about it. I even got to play the third one once, but my situation has been the same as yours, which is that when I'm playing red blue spells deck and I have a strong incentive just to play cards that just have are instants or sorceries, I'll play it. Stencia Innkeeper, the 3/3 for 3 and a red, and it taps down an opponent's land for a turn cycle.
Perfectly playable card.
Fine.
If I can, I bet I'm going to get out of this format without ever first picking it, though.
Yeah, for sure. Olivia's Dragoon.
This is a card I have first picked and anticipate doing so every now and then. 1 and a black for a 2/2. You can discard a card to give it flying until end of turn. Just a great madness outlet, efficiently costing creature, and sometimes it just gets over for the last 6 points in the air. So, by no means a prized first pick, but one that's serviceable.
Ironclad Slayer's next. This is a card that I liked quite a bit in the set review, and in the early stages of the format I also liked. Where are you at on it now? Has it gone down?
It's gone down a little bit for me because it doesn't come together all that often. Basically, the only deck I actively like Ironclad Slayer in is like black-white with numerous enchantments to get back. Yeah. And that deck doesn't come together very often, so it's like almost a gold card when you're not even guaranteed to be able to play it in those two colors, which when it's good, and you can take it 5th pick and hope to speculate, but it's not a card I really prioritize.
Yeah, same. Fiendbinder. Fiendbinder is the 3/2 for 4 mana, and when it attacks, tap target creature defending player controls.
Fiendbinder is like the definition of replacement level card for even just aggressive decks. Like it's not good in a control deck and not great in a mid-range deck, but aggressive decks will play 1 or 2 Fiendbinders, feel okay about it, but never prioritize them.
Yeah, I find it to be a very swingy card. You know, it's pretty crappy when you're behind, but it is just the trick when you're curving out on your opponent.
When you can get it to the point where your opponent can't effectively block it, whether you have pump spells or more removal spells, this is a 4-mana 3/2 that kills a creature every turn.
Yeah.
Or the same creature every turn.
Exactly. Right? You just need to be the one who's being assertive. Desperate Sentry, the 2 and a white 1/2. When it dies, you get a 3/2, and if you've got Delirium, it gets +3/+0.
This reminds me a little bit of Ironclad Slayer, where like in the right deck it can do something, but I have never really gotten to Delirium with it, so it's mostly, do I need a ground blocker and blue-white flyers with maybe a Wretched Griff in my deck?
You know, it's funny. I'm trying to think, like, have I ever had this thing be a 4/2?
I have not.
I don't remember. It may have happened. Contingency Plan.
Yeah, I'm not into that.
You're not scheming on this one. Next are uncommons. Oh, this is a really good one. I can't remember if we've opened this one recently, but it's one that I've heard multiple opinions on from pros. In fact, some of it was within your team, Channel Fireball, and Ultra Pro. It's Graph Harvest.
Oh, this Graph Harvest is interesting. So this is the enchantment for 1 black mana, and you can pay 4 mana and exile a creature from your graveyard to make a 2/2 zombie, and your zombies have menace.
Yes, and it is tapped, right? Or is it not? No, it's not.
I have not had very many decks where I thought this card was great, but in a deck that mills itself and is a control deck, it is a good finisher.
Yeah. I found it to be a sideboard card.
It does that too.
I really don't like it in the main deck. I think it's really bad. It's incredibly slow, and it feels weird, right? Because on one hand, it gives your zombies this evasion ability and makes them better attackers. Look at the zombies in this set. Wailing Ghoul, get in there with my.
Well, it's a combo with Graph Harvest.
It is, kind of, right? And so the idea is that you're going to build out a board. But when I think of that, I think, okay, I'm going to pay 4 mana for a 2/2, and I'm responsible to get creatures in my graveyard. That's a control card. That's not, And so if that's the case, then I basically ignore the zombies have menace, because by the time I actually get to the point of being able to dig up a bunch of zombies, that's when that actually turns into a decent thing to end the game. So if I just erase that text, I am not a big fan of black pay 4 mana to make a 2/2 unless my opponent's trying to spot removal all my things and isn't putting pressure on me.
Yeah, it's better as a sideboard card than a main deck card for sure. The menace.
Some people love that card.
I don't love it.
I don't either. I don't like it.
I'm still, I guess, taking Olivia's Dragoon here.
Yeah, I have lost to it, by the way. Mm-hmm. In that scenario that I described, where I was on the bad end of it. Geist-fueled Scarecrow, 4 mana, 4/4, and your creature spells cost 1 more.
There are decks where this card is awesome, where it's just you don't have much of a high end and you don't have a ton of creatures in general. It's a 4 mana 4/4, but you have to remember is 4 mana 4/4 is not intrinsically amazing. 4 mana 4/4 and no text would not be an A. It would be a B.
Yeah, it would be a B.
And this has real punishing text in the right games. So
yeah, I mean the interesting part is that it's colorless. Right?
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden your blue-white deck or whatever gets this big, beefy ground creature that can block or attack or whatever. I find that putting it in decks where it's the most expensive creature, or maybe I have 1 5-drop is best, and specifically in blue-red spells, it's great. Because you're just so not punished as much because you're running 9-10 creatures, and it's often the most expensive one you have. And then it's really good. I mean, the stats are, like you said, it's like a B-level card on stats.
Yeah, blue-red spells, it's very good. Low curve deck, like a blue-white deck that has mostly 2s and 3s, it's just decent.
Is this the worst pack we've ever opened so far?
So far, yes.
This is just horrific.
Yeah, so far, I mean, I guess I'm taking the Geist Fueled Scarecrow, but I'm not happy
bro.
about that.
Our next card is Fortune's Favor.
I do like that card.
It's neat. I don't think it's that good. It's 4 mana, 3 and a blue for an instant. Target opponent looks at the top 4 cards of your library, and then they put them into 2 piles, one of them face down. You get to pick one of the piles.
It leads to some cool mind games, and it is kind of like a draw 2 for 4. So
Instant.
I tend to play Fortune's Favor in my decks.
Do you? You'll put one in?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you don't have infinite slots to play cards that do nothing like this, but
4 mana.
but I do think this card is quite playable. I would still take the Scarecrow over it, though.
Okay.
Are we going to get bailed out? Do we have a sweet rare?
We do not, but we do have one more uncommon. It's our double face card. It's Extricator of Sin.
Okay, this card
which has gone up for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some subtleties here. It's the 2 and a white 0/3. When it enters the battlefield, you can sacrifice another permanent. If you do, you get a 3/2. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, if you have Delirium, it transforms into this 3/5 vigilance and all that stuff. And it gives your other Eldrazi vigilance. Isn't that what it does? It's also a May ability.
The May ability is not super relevant on the card.
So the thing that betrays this, though, is that like it looks like a 3-drop, but it very often isn't.
Right. You're not playing this on turn 3 and sacking a land unless you're deranged
pretty aggro.
Or basically have like no small or no expensive cards. What it does combo with cards that help you to sacrifice. Like it's in this blue-white emerge type deck. You could put cards in that would be conducive to sacrificing, but mostly it's just like it's a solid card in the late game.
Okay. Also, it does help enable its own Delirium by sacrificing a permanent, assuming that permanent goes to the graveyard. I don't know. I'm actually okay on the card. I really didn't like it when I first saw it, but I do now.
I think it's playable. I think it's actively good in a deck that's good at getting Delirium.
Yeah.
I would probably still just take the Geist Fueled Scarecrow.
I would too. So how big are you on colorless creatures that have the same power and toughness as their converted
we've got
mana
a 3 mana
cost?
3/3.
Yeah, Eternal
Scourge.
Yeah.
So
do you want a 3 mana 3/3 with a drawback / upside, or do you want
mostly a drawback? It's whenever it becomes targeted by a spell or ability, exile it, and you can play it from exile. It's a 3 mana 3/3 in most circumstances. Sometimes you're going to play against an opponent with Abyssinian Priest, and you can't really do much. But overall, I would just take the Eternal Scourge. You
would take that over the Geist Fueled Scarecrow here.
I think that a 3 mana 3/3. I would rather have a 4 mana 4/4 than a 3 mana 3/3, but the Scourge has less of a drawback.
It does.
It's basically not a drawback in most circumstances.
I think I'm going to take the Scarecrow.
All right.
I don't know.
Either way, we're not happy with that pack.
I am not happy with that pack. But the good news is we're escaping with a colorless card. So we do have that on our side. Okay, so there's a Kraken pack. Let's get into our main topic. Now, I want to talk about Magic Online in general a bit. Okay, talk about kind of the state of where it's at as far as what offerings they have for the current crop of limited players. I also want to talk a little bit about the upside of playing on Magic Online for those who don't currently. But I don't want to bury the lead here. Let's talk about the big announcement that they came out with last week, which are draft leagues. So what are these?
So in order to fulfill our new role as a Magic Issues show,
this is a Magic Talk show.
So draft leagues are something that I've been waiting for quite some time, since I think they've been kicked around.
Yeah.
What happens is you join a draft league, you draft your deck normally in a pod with 7 other people, an 8-person pod. After you're done drafting your deck, you have as much time to build your deck as you want. Think Sealed League.
Which is cool. Like, people love that about Sealed League.
Yeah, that part's great. You then hit play match, and you get paired against someone else with a 0-0 record. Draft leagues are Swiss, so you get to play out all 3 of your rounds. If you win, lose, whatever your record is, every time you hit that play button, you're going to get paired against someone with the same record. So when you're 0-0, you play against someone who's also hasn't played a match. You win your first match, you play against someone who's 1-0. You lose your second match, you then play against someone who's 1-1. And what the draft leagues do is they replace the Swiss 6-2-2-2 and pack per win queues. So if you want to play Swiss draft, you're going to be playing draft leagues.
Yeah. Now, I mean, and the key here, the thing that I want to mention or put emphasis on is that you're going to be playing against people who drafted against other people not in your pod.
Right. It's like a sealed league. You can play against anyone in this 500-person league or 1,000-person league that has the same record as you.
But that's the only requirement.
You're clearly not playing against people in the same pod every single round.
Yeah, and you're incredibly unlikely to actually play.
And you have as much time to complete the league as you want. The leagues are 2 months long.
Right, and I mean, so there's some stuff to cover here, right? I don't want to gloss over this because this is the critical difference between a booster draft and a not booster and a draft league, right? A traditional in-table booster draft.
Yeah.
Is that you're not playing the people that you drafted against.
You're not. It's cross-pod pairings.
Cross-pod pairings
is what most people would call it. So, yeah, there's a lot to digest here. First of all, let's start with the upsides.
Okay.
It's incredibly convenient. It's not even in the same universe. It really is.
It's really not.
I mean, look, everyone who's drafted on Magic Online knows you're like, all right, it's 10 p.m. I have to go to bed by about midnight. Okay, I guess I can join a draft that'll be cutting it close. And you join your draft and you draft, and sometimes you're done in half an hour, but then you can't draft again because you have to go to bed in like now an hour and a half or an hour and 20 minutes. And sometimes it takes 2.5 hours and you kind of wish it only took 2 hours. Either way, you set aside 2 or 3 hours because that's how long drafts take. You do the drafting portion, you do the deck building, it's another 10 minutes. You play round 1, you finish round 1, you spend half an hour sometimes not playing Magic as you're waiting for another match to finish that's going long. You play your round 2, maybe you wait some time for round 3, especially if you're in a Swiss queue where in a single limb queue, at least round 2 is only 2 matches instead of 4. In a Swiss queue, though, you're still waiting for 4 matches, 3 other matches in round 2, and that you have to budget time for a full draft without knowing if you're going to use all that time, which can lead to some inefficiencies there. Again, the situation where you can do a draft, but then you lose round 1 and you can't do another one, and then you just wish you could. And there's the time in between rounds, which is substantial sometimes. I mean, 20 to 30 minutes is on the high end, but that happens regularly. I mean,
yes,
like you mentioned, we both play pretty fast games. And how many times have you waited for 20 minutes? A lot of times.
A lot of times, and you feel kind of chained to your computer during.
Right, you can't go away because you don't want to lose your next match because you didn't show up. You can join another draft, which I think is sometimes I feel like. If I'm not going to do anything else, I will do that. But I know that it's not as fun to be in multiple drafts, and it's not as fun to be on the other end of it too. So the gain here is efficiency, and I don't want to because we're about to talk about a lot of different drawbacks to this and why people have this has been met with a significant amount of resistance. Actually, more than I thought it would, and I understand that But I think one dangerous fallacy is to think okay, here's the one upside, efficiency, and here's all the downsides. That one upside is not trivial.
Yeah, I tend to picture it like scales, right? Like on one hand, you're weighing out what one thing's worth, and on the other hand, you're weighing out what the other thing is worth. And sometimes the scales have a lot of different items on them, but they're all different sizes, right? And I mean, we're going to start off with the positive. It's a big rock. I mean, that is a hefty, awesome. I mean, it is a game changer, right? And I think one good checkpoint to help illustrate it is look at all of the new games that come out. Eternal, right? Hearthstone. None of these games have the draft and they have different versions of what a draft is, but all of them have it that you can play the games when you want. When your game's over, you may play another one, or you can leave and come back and do it the next day or whatever.
Well, none of these games have modes where you wait on the results of other people before you can play again.
Yeah.
Like even constructed.
Yeah.
And Magic Online is following in that footsteps too. It has constructed leagues.
Yeah.
Have you played a constructed 8-player tournament since this started?
Oh, no.
No, of course not.
No, it's just not even in my mind.
I don't even know if it's an option anymore. I assume it's not.
I don't know. I wouldn't even know.
Constructed leagues are the future of constructed.
They are the de facto way everybody plays now.
And yes, there are daily events for constructed, these 4-round events where you do have to wait for other matches to finish, but I wouldn't be surprised if leagues replace those eventually too, because the power of not having to wait on anyone else to play games is incredible. Look, an old draft, let's say the average, if you were to complete a draft as we do now on Magic Online, and the average is 2 hours and 15 minutes or something along those lines, it's pretty easy for 30 minutes of that time to be spent not playing.
Yeah.
And that's slightly less than a quarter of the time. Like, imagine being able to, like, even if you're being generous and you want to say it's okay 20% of the time, this just means you get to do 20% more drafts because you're spending your time more efficiently. 20% more drafts, and it's going to be more than that in some cases. But yeah, so this is just, I think, to be very clear, I'm heavily in favor of these. So I do want to talk about the downsides because I worry that the people who are against this feel like they're being dismissed. Yes. Which we don't want to do because we want to talk about the very real things that are on the other side of this and why we don't view them as deal breakers, because I am very much in favor of draft leagues. I'm happy to do them, and I think that they are going to be how people are going to play Magic.
Yeah, so, and I want to echo, by the way, that I'm the same. And I think it's funny because I think that there's a good chunk of the listener base that might assume the opposite. And I consider myself a draft purist. I love all of the things that we're going to talk about that we're going to be losing out on here. But I also consider myself somebody who I love booster draft in the sense, in the way that I want to share it with other people, right? I want to say, this is such a compelling, fun, cool, repeatable experience. And it's really become my de facto form of entertainment. I don't watch TV. I just don't sit there and watch TV. I don't do that. I draft, And when I want to pass some time or have some leisure time, yeah, very nice. I'll do a booster draft, and it's my opinion that the upside that we just described is so significant that it's actually going to open it up to a big group of people that it was ruled out for them to even do booster draft with any regularity for different reasons, for school, work, commitments. Just their time is, more valuable. So.
Yeah, it's not even just that, like, someone like you or I, who we generally get to draft when we want to draft. Mm-hmm. We're going to get to do 20% more because of their efficiency. Some people are going to get to do 100% more.
Yes, that's a good way to put that.
Because imagine someone who, like, their free time that they have to play Magic is like, well, I've got about an hour and a half in the evenings or an hour in the evening. I guess I just really can't draft. Now they can actually draft.
They can
play around. They can play a round a day, maybe 2 rounds if their round goes fast because they're not waiting in between them. Yeah. So this is opening the door for a lot of people who would not be able to otherwise.
The other visual that I get, I really like what you mentioned is, so you sign up for a draft, you got a couple of hours, you draft, you play your first round, you lose, or maybe you play a couple of rounds. You can put that off till the next day, and like when you wake up in the morning, you go to work, and you're like, "Ooh, I get to come home and finish up." Like, am I going to 3-0? Right? Like I'm 2-0 and I went to bed.
2-0, my deck is sick.
Yeah, my deck is sweet, and I'm looking forward to going home and playing it. Also for people, we glossed over this, but you get as much time as you want to build, and I know that there's people that will do multiple builds on the sealed leagues, and they'll really just pour over that last decision. And I just think that's cool. Like, I think if you want to do that, that's neat. Like, that's just pure upside that it doesn't take the 10 minutes. Okay, so the Swiss 6222, the Swiss 6222 and the Pack for Win queues are now gone once this comes out, and they're going to be replaced by leagues. We should note that the 8-4 single elimination queues will exist, at least currently, though I would assume that those will follow suit at some point as well, though I don't actually know that to be true. Well, they might just stay.
I do want to mention, because this is one of the things people have mentioned. It's like, well, it's easy for you to say that draft leagues are great. Your queue, the 8-4, is remaining as normal. Mm-hmm. I would love if the 8-4 was a sealed or a draft league. I would prefer that. I think it would be better. I would too. And from looking at the latest couple announcements that the Magic Online team put out, it looks like the tech for single limb leagues is just not there.
Okay.
Have no fear. If we've got skin in the game too, like we do care about this, and I would be more than happy to have 8-4s become draft leagues. So it's not just that I'm like, oh yeah, I like having this additional option, but I still get to do the thing I want to do. 8-4s, I think, would be better served as leagues.
Yeah.
So
okay. So with that being said, those are going to replace that. Let's talk about the downside. All right. We are losing something. This is not a pure upside transaction, and as we've noted, a lot of our listeners and a lot of the people on Twitter and stuff have certainly vented their frustrations at this, and I think that they're legitimate concerns that they're putting forth. So let's get into those and talk about what are some of the things that we lose in a draft league.
The first one was kind of funny, actually. Hate drafting is no longer relevant. You're not playing against the other 7 people in your pot. I mean, technically you could, but in like a 500-person draft league, let's just assume that rounds to 0, because it really does. Mm-hmm. So you should no longer hate draft. I just find this so funny because I think that if everyone just took that attitude, they would probably draft better.
I know. Isn't that funny?
Just don't hate draft. Just at this point, just be done with it. You know, it's not part of the skill. It really is not.
I think that this is going to be a funny, like this is a little bit of an aside, but it is related to hate drafting, which is that I think people are still going to do it.
Yeah.
I can just picture people still just like, oh, I'm not passing this to somebody. There is some, there's that psychological experiment where it's like you each get $10, but you have to split it up, and it's like somebody gets 8 and the other gets 2. It's better for both if they say yes, but the person that's 2 will just be like, no.
Yeah.
It's like I think there's a little bit of that, happening here. Anyway, carry on.
So hate drafting, and this does lead to a slightly different thing, which is you're now drafting maybe differently in a league than you would in not a league, and that's what some people are worried about. Is like the purity of the experience is different. You're practicing for a different thing.
And it does feel a little different. Also, this is maybe this is a little bit more fringe, but I wanted to ask you about this. Is the idea of people cooperating within the draft? Like, I'm not talking about reading signals and being nice, but I'm talking about like messaging people and saying, I'm in these colors, don't take these cards, as a mutual benefit to the entire table. Because if we all draft, our own colors and come away with on average stronger decks, and then go out into the field of 500 players and smash them, that's actually good for us now. There are a possibility.
There are more ways to exploit the system now, because it used to be that you and a friend could join the same draft and still talk to each other if you really wanted to. But because ultimately you're drawing from the same pool, maximum you could win is the first plus second place prize, which is not great. Now that no longer is the case. Now if you and your friend are in the same draft queue, you both join it, and now you're passing to each other. You can both try to draft a better deck, and then you're playing as other random people. Yeah, if people want to cheat with this, they can.
Yeah,
I think the fact
it's also against the rules.
The fact that it is cheating. Makes me not as worried about it, because if people want to cheat, there are ways to do this. This is more exploitable than most, but it's still, I don't think this is going to be a huge concern.
Okay.
Cooperation, legitimate cooperation is more incentivized because you're not playing as anyone at your table. Again, the funny thing about this is your goal in a draft, whether it's league or not league, is to draft the best deck possible. And one of the chief ways to do that is figure out what the 2 people to your right are doing, and not draft those draft, and not draft those colors.
Which is still true here.
Which is still true. So
it's even more pure now, though, because now the chances were 1 out of 7 or whatever, and now it's like.
Yeah. So now you should be aiming to cooperate. So this is again, and don't worry, I'm leading with the things that I think are the smaller differences.
Okay.
And so both hate drafting should go down and cooperation should go up, but I think that most people would be better served by doing those in any kind of draft they do. Just worry less about hate drafting and more about cooperating, and you'll be in good shape. So one place where it gets very different is, like in terms of perception, especially, is like you don't know the card pool.
Yes.
In a draft now, like I'm playing against you, like especially like imagine I was playing against you and you were to my left, so I had the most information possible. And I passed you a late Silver Strike. And now you pass with 4 mana up, and I'm just like, well, I passed a late Silver Strike. Marshall is playing red-white. I'm not going to attack here because I think he has Silver Strike.
Yeah.
Put us into a draft league, and you pass. And I thought, well, maybe I still play around Silver Strike because it's suspicious. That card costs 4 mana. But I'm way less likely to because I just don't have that information.
Yeah. And that's a fun subtlety of draft.
It is.
That is just a super interesting high-level kind of wrinkle that you don't, like, that we're losing now, right? My thought on it, though, is that I'll put myself under the bus here. I like thinking about that. I think that that's really cool. I also think that it's a little romantic. Like, it doesn't come up that often. You know what I mean? It just, like, let's just be brutally honest and say, is this a major aspect of booster draft? No. It is an aspect of booster draft. It is not a major one.
I don't think it is either. So basically, you can construct scenarios where this changes your plays. You can. It just those scenarios are so few and far between. Because take that last scenario. I think it legitimately would move the needle like a substantial amount if I knew I passed you a late Silver Strike, you were to my left, and you passed in a turn where it looked like you could have it. But that's so niche compared to, like, if you were just like 4 seats to my left, I would no longer think that because I don't have enough information.
Right.
And a lot of cards, like, the way you determine how your opponent has the card Silver Strike or Aim High in their hand is still just by how they play. It's not by, oh, I remember I passed this card to them. Yeah. That just moves the needle some, and it's so minimal. I understand why people think about this, but the part that really just doesn't bother me about it is just so minimal.
Like you're just talking about the times it occurs. I mean, remember, like what you were talking about is the person to your left is the one who you pass them that really good red card second pick. You have a lot of information about what they're doing, right? But the scenario where this actually pops up is where you pass them something that matters in this way, right? Like it kind of has to be an instant that you can actually play around or something like that. Maybe a sweeper, something like that. You're like, I know I shipped you a Wrath of God and I have to be careful. But you also have to be matched up against that person. They have to have taken the card. Like maybe you pass them a 6-pick Silver Strike and they're like Swamp, Mountain. And you're like, okay, well, you're just not even in white. So that's just now completely irrelevant, right? And that situation has to come up. Like they have to basically have drawn it and telegraphed it to make it relevant. Yes, that is all very cool. And I love thinking about that stuff. But my God, that is rare, even in just within a pod.
I'm trying to think of the last time I made a different decision based on a card I saw
like
passed.
At the Pro Tour or something like that?
First of all, it would be a live draft because I'm way more likely to know.
Like, you even pull that little
I have
door
never
over?
looked at the people in my draft. And I'm really curious, the people who are so disturbed by this, how often they look at the people in their draft.
Like I said, I threw myself under the bus on this in that, like, I love thinking about that, and I don't look.
Yeah, you don't even look at the people in your draft.
I don't look at that.
So if I play against someone, I have no idea if I'm passing to them. And I don't. It's so funny because I am someone who looks for small edges. I play professional Magic. It's built on small edges. It really is.
It is.
And this is not one I tend to pursue.
Right.
It doesn't factor in. It's not worth the mental energy. So
yeah, like you said in your example, you're probably just playing around it anyway.
Right.
At least it would occur to you. And
even at a live draft, I can't remember the last time I'm like, well, there was this late card that got passed your direction, so I'm going to play around it. I'm going to play around the cards that your actions tell me to play around because that's just a much better barometer. Because if I were to play around a card like Aim High because it got passed to you, instead of a card which the way you're playing out the game tells me to play around, that'd be wrong.
That's just wrong.
I'd rather play around, Woodcutter's Grit if that's what it looks like because of how you're sequencing your spells or what kind of attacks you're making.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's interesting. It's just so low impact.
Well, I think a big key here too is the kind of cards you most want to play around are ones that you're not going to have much information about, like a giant sweeper. Like, sure, Descend Upon the Sinful is a great card to play around. You don't get past that card very often. No. It gets picked very early.
Yes.
So how often are you going to have the information of this card exists and got passed to this person?
I know. It sucks because, again, every time you construct this scenario, it triggers a part of my brain that thinks that's interesting, that's cool, that's deep, right? That's strategic. And then, I kind of Frank Karsten run the numbers and it's like that never happens. And if it does, it's like a tiebreaker we're talking about here. Yeah.
So another really big one in terms of again, this is just me reacting to what I've seen.
Yeah.
Is the concept of weak pods versus strong pods.
This is one that comes up a lot.
It's like all the packs that got opened in my pod were terrible. My deck's like, I have the second best deck at the table, but it's really a 4 out of 10 if you look at all the decks. And now I have to play against someone who has like an 8 out of 10 because the packs that they were in were open were better. There's a couple things going on here. One, it's rarely that it's weak pod versus strong pod because it actually matters where the packs are open at the table. It's way more likely, like the pack we just opened. Mm-hmm. We took in a crack pack. We took a bad card. Mm-hmm. We took a very medium card. The person to our left is going to take a medium card, and the two people after that are just completely screwed. There's just nothing there.
Yep.
That actually impacts that side of the table. It doesn't really impact the other side of the table. If you're the person who sees that pack 7th, you're not going to think this is a weak pack.
There was
right?
nothing you were supposed to get something.
You were just going to think this is a 7th pick pack, and there's not a whole lot there for me. Whatever. So it's not that your pod got screwed here. It's that you and the two people to your left or 3 people to your left who are expecting 1st through 4th pick caliber cards, they're the ones who got screwed. There weren't those cards there. That has nothing to do with your pod, though. Remember, person 6, 7, and 8 in your pod, they didn't get screwed by this. They are getting still the cards they should get out of this pack. So even within the same pod, you have people seeing better packs and weaker packs. So playing in the same pod, it's not going to change it all that much.
Yeah, I find this argument interesting because we've seen this. We've seen this at the Pro Tour level where, maybe somebody drafted a deck that was kind of medium. And I find it, I'll find myself reminding the audience that, we didn't see a lot of great cards going around, and this deck relative to the pod might actually be pretty decent. The thing that I don't know is how much variability is there actually among draft pods? How much is there really? If we could do a study, would there be just these huge swings or is it like an aberration here or there? I obviously we don't know the answer to that, but my guess is that there probably, there's a lot of cards being opened. A lot of packs being opened.
You're opening 2/3 of a box, right?
Yeah.
So
it's obviously they can be worse or better.
Yeah, I don't know how I
can imagine it's a huge
that I know what the exact standard deviation is, But there are two things going on. One is that I don't think there's going to be a huge variance in between. The other is, like I said, it's a lot. It happens within the pod as well as outside the pod. It's not just as easy as what's inside the pod. But even when you look at what happens within the whole pod, some pods will be better than others. I just don't think that the degree there is incredibly high. The other thing is, from a win percentage perspective, it's neutral, because for every time you're I got a weak pod, so my deck is bad, you're going to play against someone with a weaker deck from a weaker pod, or you're going to be in the strong pod.
Yeah.
So I understand though that people aren't just talking about what is their expected value in this. That's not the argument. I don't want to straw man the argument here and say that.
Of course.
Because the EV is the same.
But it is worth noting that you're not losing value.
Yeah, if your complaint is that you're losing value, that this is not an argument against that. It is an argument against my draft experience is different and I don't like it as much, and that is something that can happen. Though again, I think that the overall variance from pod to pod is pretty low. It's not. You're not really going to have a pod with every deck in this pod is a 2 out of 10 versus a pod with every deck in this pod is 8 out of 10. That it's more like most. If the average is 5, there's some that are closer to 4 and some that are closer to 6. There's not going to be huge spikes on either side. Another one that is a little hard to shake, I think, is that it just doesn't feel like normal draft because of all these all these different things. Because we just talked about a couple small differences, or what we think are small differences. I think that they are such a small part of what the difference is that I basically am happy to just jump into leagues and never look back. But the aggregate of all these for some people is just going to feel different, and it doesn't feel like what they signed up for. And look, I've been at I don't draft as much at local stores these days, I will admit, but I have drafted cross-pod at local stores, and it feels weird.
It does.
It does.
It does. You have no idea what's coming.
And for those who think this feels weird, I sympathize with that. This is different from how you've drafted the last, 2, 5, 10, 15 years, whatever it is. I would implore you to try it, and then I think that weirdness will subside. So one of the things that I think it potentially holds Magic Online back as a program and booster draft as well is that it is meant to replicate roughly real life, right? You have a collection of Magic cards. They're not real. They're just bits on a server, but here you are with your collection of Magic cards that you can sell and trade and acquire when you open up a booster pack. This is weird, right? If you look at the way the collections on modern games are managed, it's much different. They're much more fluid. You can just cash them in for things that, obviously you're an expert in this, after having been on a design team for a game like that. But Magic Online has kind of made its bed. It is not an easy thing to change. And what they're doing is they're pushing a little bit in the direction of this doesn't quite mirror exactly what real life is. And my God, I know it's a little tough to swallow at first because you're like, oh, this is different and weird. But man, it feels like they're really taking advantage of some of the digital, being able to just match people up within a minute or two cross-pod is something that in real life would be very difficult. You're waiting for rounds and you're doing this stuff. And I really like the fact that they're trying to take advantage a little bit. I think that they should split off a little bit more than they do from this mirroring, exactly like real life. I mean, I don't want them to go crazy and start having
random cards or things out of your deck, or you can control your opponents, stuff that you can't do. I want it to feel like Magic still, but this is like a small in my mind, a small step in that direction. I think we should applaud that kind of thing.
You were already there. Mm-hmm. If you do an Eldritch Moon or Shadows over Innistrad, the last 2 format draft on Magic Online, you're already drafting differently than real life. Flip cards.
Yeah.
Flip cards. You do a draft at a store, you see everyone's flip cards.
Yeah.
You're drafting
and it matters.
It matters. This matters so much more than interpod pairings. It's not even remotely close.
Yeah.
It drastically changes pick orders and how you draft and how you read the table and all those things.
It also introduces a level of awkwardness where like you're looking at a pretty good red card and your opponent opened a pretty good red werewolf and you're
who
like,
picks first?
You're like, you got your hand over your gun.
But you draft on Magic Online and it's fun. And it feels like Magic, and it doesn't feel different, even though those flip cards are different. And then you draft at a local store, and it's
like I don't like that nonsense.
Right, and we're already there for something that's just clearly better. Yeah. And I think draft pods fall into this category. I'm going to make a prediction that in like 6 months, everyone's just going to be drafting in these draft leagues and just going to be loving it, and it's just going to be great.
I thought about it from a couple of perspectives. Personal draft videos. I make draft videos for Channel Fireball. You do too. Oh my God. This is going to be so much better, like a better use of my time. I'm going to be able to bang out 3 or 4 draft videos.
If you like draft videos,
1 or 2.
You're just going to see more of them.
Yeah,
we can do more.
I can't wait, because it is such a burden, especially because you can't do anything else when you're recording draft. And look, I'm not trying to say that this is a selling point on draft leagues for the masses. I'm just saying that there are other benefits that will, there'll be more draft videos around.
Well, and streams will be higher quality.
Yes.
We both stream, and I can tell you when I join a draft on stream, and then round 1 finishes, and there's 3 other matches still playing, I'm going to join another draft a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to be double queued, and I think that's just worse than...
For the economy, for everything.
Just playing, straight up.
Yeah, and I'm always in like a modern league or whatever, and that's how I'll fill the middle, or I'll play a game of Highlander or whatever,
that works out pretty
fine.
well.
Yeah, but that's just more.
Why don't you just play your 3 rounds of draft and with no delays?
I love it. There's one more downside that I did want to mention because this one, I really don't like this. I really don't like these other ones. I think that I can look at a big picture and realize how small they actually are, even if they do interest me. But this one, I'm like, ugh, cube.
Yes, I can get behind this.
So we're now doing cube drafts, which cube by most people's definition is a singleton format, meaning that there's only 1 copy of each card in the card pool.
99% of all cubes I've ever seen abide to this rule. I've seen 1 or 2 that don't.
It's one of the best things about cube. It's also, I just mentioned Canadian Highlander, same thing with Commander, is that when you play a singleton format, you have a much more varied experience, which is really great for hardcore Magic players that have been playing forever, right? But in cube, you're going to play cross-pod. That means that you could play the mirror match. They can have the counter spell that you're playing around or that you don't think you need to.
Look, the first time I'm streaming a cube draft and I tap out for something, my Grave Titan, because I'm like, I drafted the Daze, and then I get dazed, I'm going to lose my mind.
I am too. It feels wrong.
So this doesn't feel right. I can't get behind Cube League, so I'm glad you brought that up, because that's just driving me nuts.
Yeah, and so I'm curious to see, my assumption is that as a business entity, they will want to consolidate and say, if you play a draft on Magic Online, it will be a league. I don't think that there's a lot of room for adding a whole bunch of or you can do this, because there's 2 major
Q health
issues.
is a big deal.
Yeah, that's the first one, and what he's referring to is you have to have critical mass of players playing, so that when you click that make a match button, it doesn't take 18 minutes to find somebody. Especially now that it's being pickier, where drafts are pairing you against people with the same record.
Yeah, that's an additional restriction.
A sealed one won't. You can, it'll algorithm you through, but it'll send you to, I've played against people that are 4-0 or whatever.
Well, and to be clear, Wizards did not remove the 2 Swiss Qs because they hate people who draft Swiss Qs. They removed them because they need to funnel people into the leagues to make sure the leagues have, like you said, a reasonable wait time, because a 22-person draft league wouldn't work. A bunch of those people could be at work, gone or something, and I would have been waiting for 2 hours. That's nonsense. You do need I would guess closer to 1,000 people to make this work than a smaller number.
Yeah.
So
the other downside besides that is, UI complexity, user interface complexity goes up. If you're a new player, and I know that a lot of our listeners do play Magic Online, and you come in and you're like, I'd like to do a booster draft. So you go to the play lobby and you click the thing for booster draft, and it's like, do you want to play 6-2-2-2 Swiss pack per win Swiss in pod, or a 6-2-2-2 Swiss draft league, or a pack per win draft league? Like, you're like, what? I just want a big button that says draft.
Or a Dragons of Tarkir 4-3-2-2.
Yes. Yes.
Or a Magic Origins.
Flashback 8-4, or the cube draft with 3 different cues and a phantom one. Like, it really buries you. Like, when you know what you already want, you can kind of navigate through, but when you don't, it sucks. Like, you feel all the time like you maybe should have picked something else, which is just not confidence inducing for people that are trying to get accustomed to Moto.
And that's just friction. It's a barrier to entry. It means that some people bounce that wouldn't have otherwise. One other thing I want to mention, because people are worried that these draft leagues won't prepare me for the events I need to play in. They're not going to prepare me for the top 8 of the RPTQ, for the draft I play in every week, for the Grand Prix I'm attending in 3 months. I think they will. I think that they will. I know, as someone who does play in these tournaments, I will be using draft leagues to prepare for them.
Okay.
The differences are minor enough that I think that not only do these provide adequate practice, like comparable, like I don't think you're sacrificing, the extra drafts you get to play in are going to help you way more than whatever the different perceived differences are.
That's a great point. Yeah.
If your options are do 10 drafts under the old style, or 11 drafts in a draft league, you should do 11. And it's not 10 versus 11. It's like 10 versus 16 or something. So I think it's not particularly close as to which would provide better preparation.
I'm wondering, honestly, when they come up, I'm obviously going to try them out. I want to be able to be informed, and I just want to play them. But I wonder if I'm going to go back to 8-4s.
I don't believe I'm going to.
I think I might play 6-2-2-2s until they get 8-4s in, and then I'll switch back.
I like the 8-4s because I actually kind of like single limb. I like to winning it all, or just being done.
That's what I want.
You get to join another draft.
Yeah.
But a 6-2-2-2 is just going to be so much faster. In a draft league is going to be so much faster, and I think the competition level is going to be fine. So
yeah.
That's my current plan. I mean, we'll see how things feel once they come out. But just as someone who I really just value not only my time intrinsically, but also just being able to do more cool stuff. This just leads to more cool stuff. I like doing cool stuff.
Yeah, I agree. To put a cap on this, I agree with you. You said in 6 months you think people will just be drafting away on these and they won't even be thinking about it, and I agree with that. I did want to touch on a point that you made earlier, though, because I do have a lot of respect, and I really do understand where people are coming from when they're saying that this is a change that they don't want. This is tough. This is something that's important to people. It's important to us. That's why we do the show. It's important to a lot of our listeners. Again, this is a lot of people's primary method of entertainment and also, brain exercise or whatever you want to call it. And it's being taken away from them, and they don't like that. And I try to be really straightforward with people like that. And I know a lot of them. A lot of our longest listeners are having a hard time, with this type of stuff.
It feels weird.
It feels weird.
At no point have I said that that's not true.
Yeah, it does feel weird, and I agree with that. The two things that I would want to say is that I think, just being blunt, it is bad for you, and it's better for everybody. And that sucks. When you have the thing that you really like taken away, but it's for the better good, that sucks. It does. And I think that there's just no sugarcoat you can put on it other than you are having something that you really enjoyed changed or taken away.
Why do you say it's bad?
What do you mean?
Like, when you say it's bad for you, what do you mean, I guess?
So I'm saying that, like, if you had something that you loved, right, that was perfect, like you're like 8-4s are exactly what I want. This is all I want to do. This is the format. Everything's perfect. And then they said, we're not going to do 8-4s anymore. We're changing them. We're going to replace them with leagues or whatever it is. That's a net negative for you as a person, as an individual, right? But what's happening here is that this is going to open up booster draft to a huge group of people that it wasn't open to before. And that is better. That is better for everybody. And I know that it's hard, it's a tough pill to swallow sometimes because it isn't better for you necessarily, right? Now, I would actually make an argument that it might be. I would. I really do think that the time savings and stuff and the downsides are going to be lower. But I'm not here to convince you that what I think is better for you. You know what you want, and if this isn't what you wanted, that sucks. And you are losing on something here. But I think that I would try my best to see things from the biggest picture possible that I could, and recognize that this type of change really does open the door for players. And I'll tell you what, I would take a much bigger hit than these are actually. I would take a 20% enjoyment hit if I thought that this was going to open this up to thousands of new players who go from zero, like you said, 0 to 100% enjoyment hit. It's like sometimes you do have to look after things. And one of the things that I'm always aware of when it comes to Magic is the health of the game. We've been experiencing a boom in Magic for the past 8 years, right? It has just gone up, and the tournaments are bigger than ever, and everything's going great. But it's not always like that. I went through a similar thing with poker, with the poker world. There was a huge boom in the early to mid 2000s that brought in thousands, hundreds of thousands even, of players who just didn't care about it. But the combination of having poker on television, of an amateur winning the biggest tournament, and a few other things with online poker really created this huge boom, and it felt like it was never going to end. And then it did, and it's all come crashing down, and poker doesn't look anything like it did 10 or 12 years ago. And I'm always thinking about that for Magic. What does it plateau off? Does something bad happen? What's the deal? And we have to make sure that we cultivate our own communities to make sure that when I go on to draft on Magic Online, that there's other people there to draft with me, and I don't want to take it for granted. And I think that this is going to help bolster that a lot. So it's just another thing to consider. I know that it's a little doomsday-ish, and it's not really something that's pressing, but I do think about this stuff. I want to draft until I'm dead, man. I want to be able to choose if instead of watching television or vegging out, that I can use my brain and challenge myself in that way, and I want to keep that going for as long as I can. I think this does work towards that goal. Okay, let's get into a couple of nitty-gritty things here, Luis. We're not. I'm going to talk first, just for a few minutes, about the benefits of Magic Online, but I'm going to try to keep it brief. I think that we've talked pretty well in depth about that stuff, and then I want to give you a chance to talk about your shortcuts, and a couple that I'll add in as well. But I am a big advocate for Magic Online. This show has always been a big advocate for Magic Online, while also maintaining integrity with our listeners and recognizing that Magic Online is far from a perfect program. It is not that.
Is this where you put the hashtag ad part, or is that later in the show?
So I am, at the end of the day, an advocate for Magic Online. I think that Magic Online is an excellent way, maybe the best possible way, for you to improve at our game. The reason is simple: volume. You can play more on Magic Online, and one of the best ways to get better at Magic, especially at the early stages, is to play a lot. I don't even want to know how much you played when you were in your, coming up the ranks. I mean, you guys, you must have played infinite, right?
Yeah, it was a lot.
Because I know how you are. You can put your head down and do something like that for just hours and hours,
I conservatively played 40 hours of Magic Online a week.
Yeah.
But my guess is...
While in school or whatever else?
Yeah, I mean, I was in school. I can't say I was giving it my full attention. But I would say some weeks it was certainly more than that.
Yeah. And, and I think that just the sheer number of matches that you play, let's say you were putting in your 40 hours a week in practice and learning, is so much higher on Magic Online than it is live. If you were just to sit there and go to a local shop and play 40 hours a week, you would play a fraction of the number of matches and drafts and whatever it is that you want to do. So that's the big thing about Magic Online. That's the killer app, if you will, of Magic Online is volume. It opens you up to be able to play a whole lot. The other thing it does that I really like is that it has a very good rules engine behind it, where yes, there are bugs. There are. I'm not trying to downplay that, but for the most part,
sometimes the bugs are really funny though.
They can be. They can be.
Well, less funny when you lose a game, but sometimes they're
yes. But the rules engine generally does a pretty darn good job, and what it does is it teaches you the rules in a rather ruthless way. It is not forgiving, but that I think is the best way to go about it. It also gives you a visual representation of a lot of the things that happen in a game, like abilities and cards on the stack, or priority passes and when that's happening. That is hard to nail down in real life because it's so it's so non-visual. It's just a thing that happens. And I think that by playing on Magic Online, you can really solidify a lot of those rules interactions and such.
You do gain a lot more rules knowledge. I remember it was actually kind of funny a comment when I first played on the Pro Tour by one of the more experienced Pro Tour players. When I made like some play that demonstrated a pretty intricate understanding of the rules. He's like, oh yeah, you're one of those Magic Online guys. Like,
really?
Yeah. He's like, yeah, they know all those tricks.
And were you?
I was. And the reason that I didn't know that stuff was because Magic Online just does teach it to you. Like you said, ruthlessly. If you mess it up, you're going to lose a game because of it. One drawback to this is that it makes you a little lazy. It stacks your triggers for you when you're sitting there with Courser of Kruphix in play. Every time you play a land, you gain a life. You don't have to do anything. And Magic Online does that for you. When you go and play a live tournament, your opponent's not going to remind you of that.
Yeah.
They're not going to be like, excuse me, would you like to gain your life?
Yeah.
They're going to be like, this idiot doesn't gain life.
Yes, exactly.
And you have to worry about that too. But in terms of learning how exactly cards work, Magic Online does a very good job of that. And if remembering triggers is not part of the fun of Magic for you, as it isn't really for most people, if you just play on Magic Online, then you don't have to worry about that part. That is not a skill that you have to learn. And if that's how you interact with Magic, then more power to you. It's just you've gotten to opt out of one of the like memory game type things that Magic, maybe not isn't the most fun part of Magic.
Right. As far as offerings go on Magic Online right now for limited players, as we mentioned, there's a pretty big shakeup going on when it comes to the drafts, and I wouldn't be surprised to see the leagues become the de facto way to draft on Magic Online, within the next some time frame, 6 months to a year or whatever. And then there's also sealed leagues, which I think are really, really cool. I've been a fan of them since they came out. I think that they were a big hit when they came out as well. And they're a really good way to kind of pace yourself and get better at sealed if that's what you want to do. And also just play limited Magic. Like, it's not just about sealed deck. It's also, just a good way to get your hands on the cards.
And look, I mean, this is limited resources. If you want to hear about Constructed Resources is a good podcast. But I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that Magic Online is a great place to play Constructed.
It really is. It's the only way I get to play.
Well, first of all, there's no collection management. Like, all your cards are always there. You don't have to go digging through, your box to find abrupt decays or, collected companies or whatever card it is you're looking for.
Yeah.
Like, oh God, I swear I had Hangerback Walker. Where did that go? But it's also really easy to put decks together. There's no shuffling. These are like the little things that kind of add up over the course of time. I tell you that when testing for Worlds, actually, we finally get together here in Seattle. We did not play a live Magic against each other. We just battled on laptops.
Really?
Yeah, we just had all the cards. It was so easy to build decks on Magic Online because we had the decks we were already testing, and there's no shuffling, and it's just very fast.
Yeah, it's much more efficient.
So, I'm not advocating that we move towards an existence where tournaments are held on laptops. I love playing physical Magic. I think it's a lot more fun, like in terms of just holding the cards and seeing the cards and manipulating, like the tapping of your cards and just like playing them. It's cool, but in terms of just straight up efficiency, Magic Online is really good. Yeah, and that kind of leads us into how do you play efficiently on Magic Online?
Yeah, and this goes back to our listener question as well, right? Yeah. Which is that there is a bit of a step up if you're only used to playing on paper. There are some things that you can do to really help to help keep your clock and help keep things more efficient on Magic Online. So why don't you talk about a few of those?
So the first is don't set tons of stops. So Magic has a ton of different phases. You'll learn what they are playing on Magic Online.
You'll see them right on your screen. Yeah.
The phases I have set is on my turn. I have my main phase, beginning of combat, declare attackers, declare blockers, and main phase, second main phase. So I don't have a stop on my upkeep. I don't have a stop on my own end step. These are just places where I tend not to have priority, like combat damage. These are not places where I need priority. The opponent, it's the same, except I don't have the main phase stop. So I just have beginning of combat, declare attackers, declare blockers, and their end of turn. And one of the mistakes I see people frequently make who feel pressured by time is having a stop set on every stop. Because, I might need to respond on their upkeep, or have play an effect on their upkeep, or I might need to do something during someone's draw step. Like, you can just individually set those. Like, when I draw, Vendilion Click, and I want to cast Vendilion Click during their draw step, I mentioned construction twice now on this episode. I set a stop on their draw step for that turn, and then I take it off immediately. Because clicking through every stop you don't have set is another stop you don't have to click through. So reducing the number of clicks is big. So that's where I would start. And the stops I use is from trial and error of what are the stops I use frequently enough that I don't want to have to keep resetting them. And in this case, it is again, on my turn, the 2 main phases plus the three steps during combat. On the opponent's turn, their end of turn and the 3 steps during combat, and that's it. You don't need your own end of turn. The normal pace of Magic isn't to say like, all right, on my end of turn, cast this.
It's also incredibly annoying when your opponent has one on your draw step.
Oh, the draw step one's the worst.
Yeah,
you draw your card and you're like, I want to play my turn now.
Can I have my card?
Let me just wait. I might have an effect on your draw step. They never do.
They never do.
Another really big one is using the correct shortcuts, using the F keys. The first one which I honestly didn't learn until I'd been playing Magic Online for 5 years, and one which I'm sure plenty of people don't learn is F8. This is the second most important key. So at the beginning of every game, I press F8. What does that do? That means I get auto-passed every time I'm tapped out and can't do anything. So I press F8, and then on turn 1 I go land 1 drop. It immediately passes to my opponent's turn, and I never get priority on their turn. And you know why that's awesome, and why F8 is completely safe to press, and why you should always press it? It just passes you when you can't do anything. Basically, it says, "Hey, I noticed that you can't do anything. Would you want to pass priority?" It's like, yes, I do. And that saves you a lot of time. It just reduces the amount of clicks you have to use. In the past, there were bugs with Convoke and F8 where you could auto pass through being able to cast Convoke cards. So I don't want to say it's 100% safe because I did lose a game to that, and that was pretty annoying. But that's another category of bugs. That's not on F8.
Yeah. Now there's some that aren't bugs that are a little awkward with it too, like free spells, right?
It does stop you if you have a free spell, like if you have Force of Will in your hand, or if you have a cycling card that doesn't cost mana to cycle.
Yeah. And the downside being that maybe if your opponent was paying a heck of a lot of attention, they could discern that, you must have it now, right? The truth is that I think that's quite minimal. I mean, most people don't pay that much attention. They don't know if you've F8'd. Yeah. You could have just been aggressively F6ing or whatever. So I don't really put a lot of stock in that.
I even play a lot of decks that have Force of Will in it, and I still always F8. Speaking of F6, F6 is the most powerful but also the most dangerous of the keys. If you press F6, it auto passes you the rest of the turn.
Except for combat. Bless you.
Excuse me. It is worth noting, both on F8 and F6, you're not passed through combat. You also have the opportunity to declare blockers or declare attackers. So don't worry about that. But yes, F6, if you press F6 on your turn, it is your opponent's turn.
Yes.
You forgot to play a land? Don't press F6.
Yes, exactly.
You actually do have a counterspell? Do not press F6. So this one takes a little bit more practice, but again, the benefits are huge. There was actually a week where F6 didn't work. One of the updates basically disabled it. I did not play Magic Online that week because it's so fast. If you wonder one of the ways that the people who play a lot of Magic Online how they play so fast, it's because they just they have F8 on and they use F6 a lot.
Yep.
Because that just means you don't spend a lot of time clicking through things you don't need to. Look,
that's what it means.
When you have 2 lands untapped and none of the cards in your hand cost 2 or less, and you just press F6, you don't have to click OK the 5 times you'll have to click OK. And that adds up.
It adds up in a huge way.
Not even just for clock, also just for your fatigue in terms of just hitting OK.
Yeah. The equivalent that I like to use for F6, Luis, is saying go in real life, where you can't take that back, right? You just your turn. That's what it's saying. If you hit that, you have said your turn, and you can't be like, oh, I forgot to play a land. Your opponent's going to be like, sorry, bro, that's not how that works. So, yeah, F6, very powerful. Be careful.
F7, this is a slightly more niche, but still worth using. If it basically auto stacks your non-targeted triggers, which sounds like gobbledygook, I'm sure.
It auto stacks your non-targeted triggers. They all have to be the same.
So it's something like prowess. If you have a prowess creature out, like this comes up the most with Monastery Mentor. You have a bunch of monk tokens out, and they all have prowess, and you press F7, and that way you don't have to like stack them.
Yeah, the problem is that like if any of the things are different, it won't F7 all of them.
Right.
But anyway, whatever.
It still saves you time.
Exactly.
And you can also, speaking of triggers, you can right-click on a trigger to always yield to it, and then if it's a trigger that you, like if it is like, would you like to gain a life, you're always going to say yes, you can right-click and also always say yes. You don't have to waste time clicking on that. And this sounds like a lot of stuff.
The awakening zone.
Right. But if you start using these, and maybe don't use all of them at once, maybe just ease into them, at the end of it, you're just going to be a lean, mean, Magic Onlining machine. I mean,
It's true.
You will speed through turns, and you will be able to get into a cadence where you do not waste excess time.
Totally. I have a next level tip as well.
Ooh.
This one will make you the most powerful mage possible. I really do think that this is actually a game changer, which is that Magic Online, and to their credit, has the ability to remap keys as you see fit. So F6 is, and then F2, by the way, is one we should mention here as well.
F2 is just hits OK.
Yeah, I don't actually use it myself.
I don't that often.
Yeah.
But if you're inclined to press F2 instead of click OK, that works too.
I shouldn't say that. I remapped it. I use it a lot, but only after I remapped it. So F2 is just the OK button. It just says OK. And then there is also F3, which removes any auto yields.
Right. If you accidentally have F6, but your opponent hasn't taken it yet, you can just jam F3
and hope you get it.
I jam F3 a reasonable amount of the time.
My F3 key is not happy with me usually. So here's the deal: Magic Online in the account settings lets you choose whatever key you would like for any of these shortcuts. Okay, and so what I do is I map them to A, S, and D. Which if you play a lot of games, you kind of have a natural resting position with 3 fingers on those keys. And I will map S is F2. So if I just need to hit OK, I just hit S. D I have as F6, so I can just pass the turn. And then A I have as F3 in case I need to back out of anything. So when I play Magic Online on a laptop or with a mouse, so a trackpad or a mouse, my left hand doesn't move. It just stays with my 3 main fingers on the keyboard, and then my other hand uses the mouse. And I don't have to look down at the keyboard ever, and I don't have to reach up and go, well, which one's the F6? And some computers you have to hold down a function button just to hit the function keys because they have some other thing mapped to them already. And it is very easy to do this, by the way, to remap these keys. And everybody that I've shown this to, because it's a little weird, it's a little out of the comfort zone, you may have been playing for years, every single person I've shown this to has said this is so much better. Like, it's way easier to play Magic Online with it, and I know it feels like a small change when I tell you about it. It feels much bigger when you actually play it. Like, it is fantastic, and I highly recommend it. You certainly don't have to do it the way that I do, but however you want to set it up, whichever keys your hand is comfortable on. Maybe you want to use the F key because it has that little mark on it, and you don't have to look down. Whatever it is, I highly recommend at least just giving it a shot. If you don't, you can just send it back to the other thing and no big deal. But play a match or two with it, and you'll be like, wow, this is way easier. Like, once you get used to it. I think that once you get to that point where you've remapped your keys using the built-in functionality in Magic Online, and you understand the basic function keys, the F2s, the F6, the F8s, I think that the clock issues go away, and also just your general happiness level with playing on Magic Online tends to go up, at least for me.
It just feels like a sleeker experience.
Yeah, it really does. And it does take a little practice to get good at, but it is so worth putting in that time. I mean, it's like typing on a keyboard. Like, if you've taken the time to be a touch typer where you don't look at the keyboard, you're just typing, you feel so much more productive and in tune, and you're just typing more words than somebody who's what we call it, hunt and peck, where they're like looking at the key and using one finger. I mean, you can get kind of good at that where you're doing it a lot, but nobody that does hunt and peck can even touch somebody that's a touch typer as far as speed and efficiency with that stuff. So that was the one thing that I also wanted to throw in was that functionality is not, it's built in. You don't have to do anything special to do it. You just have to go in the account settings.
I do have now the urge to remap your keys at some point while you're not.
Mine? Oh, God. F6 on F2, so I just passed the turn. Thankfully, you have no idea how to do it. So,
well, I am a technological genius. I'll
Yeah,
figure it out very, very quickly. So to kind of wrap it up on Magic Online, it's got a bunch of different offerings. It's got some things you have to learn. Like this, I think the barrier to entry is the biggest thing here.
It's not low.
Imagine someone who, well, hopefully some audience listeners fall into this camp who've never played Magic Online and now interested in checking it out. We're talking about F2s and F6s and F8s and auto passing and all these stacking triggers, and it sounds like a lot because it kind of is. Kind of is. To enfranchised users like Marshall and myself, Magic Online works great, and we get to jam infinite games, and it's so fast and so convenient. To people who haven't played on it before, it's like, wow, this is a new, big, intimidating program. It's got a lot of fiddly pieces going a lot of different places. It's hard even to find how to get into a game. It's hard to play a game without misclicking or screwing up or running out of time. And there's nothing we can say that will make that easy. What we want to kind of assure you of is, first of all, there's ways you can learn. And second of all, that it's worth it.
It's worth it.
And
it's worth it. That's the key.
Yeah. End of the day, like, getting to play Magic online is pretty awesome.
Yeah. I think a good comparison for those that haven't played it would be Photoshop, Adobe Premiere, right? These high-end programs that allow you to do very powerful, very cool things, but you have to put in the time to learn them. You don't just open it up and start making great stuff in Photoshop. It's tough to do.
Kind of reminds me of Magic the Gathering, a game that has a lot of fiddly bits and is difficult to learn, but is really fun to play once you...
Yeah, it is. Is there a correlation?
I mean, try to explain Magic to someone who's never played Magic, it's kind of the same things.
Yeah. So anyway, I do encourage you to try out Magic Online. It is not without its faults. It is tough to get into. Sometimes the bugs can be annoying.
It's also not cheap.
And it's not cheap.
Draft is $14, so
yes.
Don't be under no illusions that, if you lose a bunch of drafts, like when I first started playing Magic Online, I
spewed it off
a good amount of money because I'm just like, well, I'm not winning very many of these drafts, but I want to keep drafting. So
yeah, and I mean, we can get into it in another show, but there are ways to mitigate those costs as much as possible. But still, you're going to be paying money, and it does cost money, so keep that in mind as well. But I think these leagues are going to allow you to stretch out that draft value a little bit further and not feel like you got one night of entertainment, but maybe a couple of days if you want to play one match a day or limit yourself.
Yeah. Try out these draft leagues. Like they're going to be great. They are a game changer. They're just going to make the Magic Online draft experience like a significant amount.
I can't wait for them. Okay, let's call it a show here. I did want to mention one other resource, which is the LR subreddit. If you have questions about Magic Online, you can go there, and most of the people on there play on Magic Online, and they're going to be able to answer your questions and get you where you need to go.
Yeah, if you want to see more debate on draft leagues, you can also
there was a healthy debate thread there for sure. There was on the main Magic
there's
one.
There's now a bunch of them.
Now there's a bunch. Yeah. And people are opinionated, and I get it.
I know. I love it. I love that people are invested enough to talk about all this stuff and to care about all this stuff. Yeah. And I posted in the first thread a bunch of times too.
Yeah. So there you go. All right, that's going to do it for this show. I want to remind you that Limited Resources is brought to you by channelfireball.com. Make sure that you check out their website for all of your Magic needs. They're going to have singles. They're going to have sealed product. They're going to have supplies, including Limited Resources gear. You can get Limited Resources deck boxes, sleeves, and T-shirts there right now as well if you're into that. And of course, the free content. You can go there and find, like we said, draft videos, maybe more coming soon with the leagues. Who knows? And articles for some of the best players in the world, all with the goal of helping you improve at Magic. If you want to find us on social media, I'm Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV. You can find everything related to the podcast on lrcast.com. And Luis, before we finish, I wanted to say good luck in the World Championships.
Oh, I won't need it. Wait, that's not true. I would take all the luck that is on the table and off the table. Marshall's just losing it.
I'm like, wow, who is this guy?
Live shows are the best. We should try to finagle our schedules so we can do them. It is a lot more fun doing live shows.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe not the night before the biggest tournament of my life, which now is going to be seriously impacted.
It's only 11 p.m. I'm going to get you. You're going to be in sleep in half an hour.
I couldn't even finish.
Yeah. Anyway, that'll do it for this show, and we'll see you next time.
Do you know what the definition of strictly better is?
I don't. I mean, I know what it is in R&D terms. I do know like how R&D uses the term. I don't know what the actual definition is.
So when we talk about strictly betters, and trust me, I've had so many terrible strictly better conversations. What we mean,
worst conversation ever.
It is strictly worse than other conversations. But A strictly better card is one that is just better than another one. A really good example is Shock and Lightning Bolt.
Yep.
Shock, 1 red mana, deals 2 damage. Lightning Bolt, 1 red mana, deals 3 damage. The terrible conversations come when people talk about, what about Mindslaver? What about, whatever.
Yeah.
Lightning Bolt's strictly better than Shock. Okay, end of story. That's great.
Another definition would be that it obsoletes a previous card.
Right.
That you wouldn't play card A anymore.
Right, and like Volcanic Hammer, 1 in a red sorcery, deal 3 damage. Strictly worse than Lightning Bolt. Lightning Bolt's strictly better, even though you can say, like, what about cards that counter a sorcery? Like, again, or an instant, I guess, in this case. So, strictly better. I thought about how can you apply the term strictly better to things that aren't Magic cards?
Oh, what did you do?
I've got a list of 5 things that are strictly better. And again, when I say strictly better, it just means there's no reasonable argument for taking the strictly worse version. So the first one is iced tea or iced coffee compared to the hot version, hot tea or hot coffee.
Okay.
Iced is just strictly better.
It is strictly better. I'm with you.
There's just no compelling argument you can make. It's more refreshing. You can drink it faster because you can't hurt yourself.
I can't even. I'm just not gonna get on Twitter.
Right. When you order it, you get more of it. That's just obvious.
It's denser?
Yeah. Well, no. Like, when you order a hot coffee, you get like a little 8-ounce cup of coffee. When you order an iced coffee, you get like a 16-ounce cup.
I thought you were making the physics argument.
No.
Because it's hotter. The molecules are more expanded.
When you order iced tea or iced coffee, you get way more of it if you order. And combined with the fact that it's just better intrinsically means
I thought you were going to say combined with lemonade, but
well, no, that's an Arnold Palmer, which is strictly worse than iced tea. But
come on, that's ridiculous.
So iced tea and iced coffee is just strictly better than the hot versions. Like that's just clear. You don't need a drink holder because it can't burn your hands. Like, come on, we want to enjoy a drink. We don't want it to have to worry about it.
You can pour it on your lap and not go to the hospital.
Yeah,
strictly better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The next category is beta cards versus non-beta cards.
Oh.
And look, I don't weigh in on what cards people should play.
You do too.
Under any circumstances but this. Okay, in a couple of
Wait, you tell me not to play mine. How are you making this argument?
Well, because beta lands just look better than non-beta lands.
But when I play them, you say I shouldn't play them.
Well, that's in a limited tournament. You're not supposed to play beta lands in draft. That's just disrespectful.
But anyway, they just look better.
So the real heartbreaker here is that I just don't get an opportunity to play beta cards very often. I get to play basics. Every now and then I get to play birds in a modern tournament or lightning bolt in a modern tournament, but it's just few and far between.
You have beta birds? Oh, dear God.
Do other kinds exist? So, normally I'm not one that's big on aesthetics, but for whatever reason, and I think it can't be nostalgia because it's just so strictly obvious, it's just intrinsic that beta cards look better than non-beta cards.
Also, I have to disagree. I think maybe you've grown up since the last time you checked in on your aesthetic stuff, but like you're wearing this beautiful shirt here, you have all these sweet cards. I think you're a little more up on aesthetics.
I didn't think that's the direction you're going here, but anyway, we can all agree beta cards better than non-beta
Absolutely,
versions.
not remotely.
The next one's less controversial, I think. Dogs are strictly better than cats.
Okay. As a cat owner, I agree, actually. I love dogs.
Look, dogs will provide you with the physical and emotional support you need. They'll come over to you. They'll play with you. They'll fetch things. Dogs also provide like useful services, like they'll chase things and catch things and
oh no.
And dogs, they'll work with you. You're a team. Cats. Look, I've lived with cats before. They're tyrants. They under no circumstances does a cat even remotely pretend to listen to you, think you're equals, think even that you're someone worth like considering. So I think it's really hard to make an argument for cats over dogs.
Wow. And you're lucky we're in this other room and my cat can't hear you.
You're not going to debate this one either. Getting up early is strictly better than getting up late. And see...
What?
When you stay up, like... I'm imagining most people, they're trying to get 7 or 8 hours of sleep a night, right? Like let's just say that. I know some people don't all get that much, whatever. If you get to choose your sleep schedule, if you don't have constraints on it, and a sleep schedule of going to bed at like 11 p.m. and getting up at 7 a.m. is just strictly better than one where you go to bed at 3 a.m. and get up at 9 a.m. or 10 or 11 a.m.
Why?
The things you do, and look, I've been on all these schedules. What you accomplish between the hours of 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. is just less useful and less motivated.
What? That's my prime time.
Than what you accomplish between the hours of 7 a.m. and 11 a.m.
I can't believe you just said that.
You can't tell me
I'm so productive.
You can't tell me that more productive stuff happens at 2 a.m. versus at like 9 a.m.
For me, yes.
Just in general.
Oh, in general, sure.
Look,
I mean, more things are open.
You.
Maybe I would buy that, but
yes, that is part of it. Things are open.
Like I can't go grocery
Other people
shopping.
are on the schedule. If you streamed at like 10 p.m., I would watch it. You stream at like 2 a.m., I can't watch it. Reasonable people are asleep. The other thing is, if you go through the effort of getting up at 7 a.m., you want to make something of that time. you don't want to spew it off.
It's motivational.
You know that you paid a cost here, and you're going to pay that cost, and you're going to get some value out of it.
God.
So I think that...
Not coincidentally, what time do you get up in the morning?
Like 7 a.m. As someone who gets up early, I found it to be... Look, right now, currently I do have a job where I have to be at work at 9. Even there have been times when that wasn't the case. When I was just like the editor for Channel Fireball and I could get up whenever I wanted to. I found myself to be way more productive when I was on a more normal sleep schedule of getting up at around 8 or 9 a.m.
What about if you're somebody like me?
Well, I think that you would be best served by getting up early because as we've just demonstrated, strictly better.
All right.
I know that there are different kinds of people who have different optimal sleep schedules, but. That doesn't actually.
Can we accommodate me on this one?
All right, the last one. I think you're going to have a hard time arguing either. It's burritos are strictly better than sandwiches. So
I'm not arguing that.
Both of these are foods where you're using some kind of carb, in which case bread versus like a tortilla, as a delivery mechanism for things that are more delicious that are in sandwiches. Burritos just completely dominate sandwiches in pretty much every metric. First of all, burritos are filled with better things on average. There are more guacamole, in burritos than there are in sandwiches. Grilled chicken or like steak is obviously better than like lunch meat. That's just not close.
That's not close.
Burritos are also more convenient. You can hold a burrito in one hand and eat it.
True.
And a sandwich is a lot more difficult to hold in one hand. First of all, it's going to be messier. Things are going to fall off the side. You have to pay a lot more attention. Two-handed is optimal for sandwiches. People don't eat sandwiches with one hand very often. Whereas a burrito, one-handed is perfect if it's a well-constructed burrito.
Oh, man. We really hit your passion point here.
No, I'm really going off. The second is anything you could put in a sandwich, you could also just put in a burrito, and it would be better.
Wait, you would put, like, cold ham cuts in a...
It's called a wrap. People eat wraps all the time. And
You're selling a wrap? Oh.
I consider a wrap to be a subset of burrito. And burrito to be superior to both wraps and sandwiches, but because it's still in that same category, it's just this meets the strictly better definition. Burrito is very clearly the lightning bolt to sandwiches shock.
Wow,
it's not even close. So.
Wow. We've learned a lot about you today.
All I want to say is strictly better is a way to make sure you're getting the optimal value from the things you consume and the way you live your life. And as long as you follow these rules of strictly better, you'll enjoy your burrito and your iced coffee with your faithful dog at your side at 7 a.m.